Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk all things round 13 about my team. It's the second round of the buys, and it's a pretty good one for most owners. Geelong and Gold Coast, for those who have maybe Stewart and Anderson, Rao, Humphrey, might be a little bit more tougher than the rest of us, but for most of us, we are pretty happy and comfortable. Before I get into last week, as always, continue to check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, and then we've got TikTok, Spotify, SoundCloud, and to contact us via Twitter, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swiz26 for me directly. Firstly, thank you to everybody who came out last week. It was awesome catching up the centre bounce boys at the game. North Melbourne Essendon was a terrific match of footy. A few of us had a couple of drinks over at the King's Hotel for the GWS Richmond game, so that was a lot of fun as well. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll try to get together at some point. Hopefully Ben and Chris can get down here at some point, or maybe I'll venture back up to Queensland again. But naturally, most of our listeners are down here in the south, so we will try to do something at some point soon. For me, 1940 last week, I was pretty happy with that because I did the triple down. So in my team came Ford, Wardlaw, and I know there was one other rookie that definitely came into my side. And Briggs, awesome, 128, kicked an important goal late, so that worked out fantastic. So yeah, that put me back up inside the top 1,000, 944, which happens to be the exact same rank and score as Supercoach Mama. So we're having a discussion about that, and she is making another run towards the 50k, which would be amazing to do it 2 in 3 years. So good luck to her. So I managed to bank a lot of cash last week. I was having Will Day out until the late news that Mitchell pulled out with illness, so Will Day survived another week. And thinking about it, originally, come Monday, he was out of my side, but he looks like he will survive now. So I've been looking at 2 different plans and been talking to the boys and a couple other groups that we have today, try to outline my what I want to do, not just for these buy rounds for 14 and 15, but for the rest of the season. So there's an obvious couple of trades this week, and we'll get into that in a moment, and then we'll talk about sort of the long-term views, what I'm trying to decide here. So for me, the obvious this week, and I think this is for most people, if you don't own him, is Lachie Neale. So it doesn't really matter who you wanting to trade him out. I'm actually going to go Jack Zeeble. Really disappointed with his game last week. Dropped a ton of cash. He's going to drop another ton of cash. But the biggest issue I've got is just the role with him. He still was able to find the ball, but to have those 3, kick outs out on the full, they could have very easily, take the 9 away from that and maybe, can get, say, 6 to 10 points for those actual kicks hitting a target. Straight away there, he's scoring closer to an 80, even if it's just 75. So the damage isn't as bad, but the biggest issue is the role. With the change of coach, with Clarko obviously, out for a kind of mental break, with Ratton coming in, he's brought Aaron Hall back in, so Hall just demands the ball back there. And the game plan's changed too. North Melbourne have definitely been a lot more attacking and aggressive over the last 3 weeks. They're playing with a little bit more freedom, where Clarko was trying to get them to play this defensive structure with a long-term view of that's the game style he wanted them to play. That game style obviously helped Jay-Z, but now with Ratton coming in and implementing his own style, there's definitely been a change there. So that does have me worried going forward. Zeeble does have his bye coming up next week. Well, not next week, but the week after in round 15, which that is the round I'm a little short in. So I have to look at somebody trading out of that round. So he is the one that is unfortunately going to go. The only thing that could potentially change my mind would be if I saw Aaron Hall drop tonight. But in saying that, I think maybe the damage is done there. So Zeeble out at 500k. And we're going to turn him, or 517k, and we're going to turn him into Lachie Neale. So we'll go Zeeble out there, and I'm going to just move the great man, Charlie Constable, playing a role for my team, and out he goes, which will mean I can bring in any midfielder I want, and the obvious one there this week is Lachie Neale. Now, why he is obvious is just, apart from the fact it's Lachie Neale, he's averaging 110, 3-round average of 119, but he has a very friendly draw coming up. There's a lot of games there. We know like there's potential there for Lachie Neale. He can get attention, but we've sort of Dunkley there taking the pressure off. Even Ashcroft, was it against the Crows where Keys gave him some attention? It's not always the attention's going to Neale. So, Brisbane, Hawthorn next this week up at the G, the Swannies at the Gabba. They've got the Tigers a couple of weeks after that, then West Coast also at the Gabba. So it's a very friendly game. So if it's not Neale, it might be Dunkley goes off. But you would want to at least give Dunkley some attention. So I think that's just a natural, obvious one. And Neale will come here. And not will he only just come into my side, he will be the vice captain this week. I know a few people are looking at the Saints and Swannies game tonight, which is natural, but I just think he is an obvious one against the Hawks, especially the fact that we've got Humphrey, so we've got all the flexibility in the world, or if you have Constable, to chuck a captain on as late as you need to. So I think he is the obvious one there. And I'll talk about a few VC and other captain options in a moment. All right, so trade number 2 this week, and unfortunately is the other North Melbourne player, 72, Sheasel. He looked awesome when he was in that halfback role. Still looks great, got the chance to go in the midfield. The game was on the line. Him, Wardlaw, and Phillips were in there, clearly backing the young fellas in. But the problem is, still playing for North, going forward. He could have kicked a goal late, which would have got his score into the 80s. But he's going to be relying on either kicking goals or getting that ball in the midfield. And that's not going to be the easiest thing to do, especially with LDU and Simpkin coming back in. He's going to get pushed more forward time, or they're going to try him in other roles. I don't think his development's going to be great for him just to sit back at half back. I don't think that's what the long-term view for him is there. So Sheasel is going out. And I will make this trade, which actually gives me 945k. So I'm actually going to be bringing another midfield. We'll put Roberts forward for now. And I've had the big debate this week between the 2 Fremantle players, both Sarong and Brayshaw. And, have been looking fantastic, especially more Brayshaw over the last few weeks with that 116 average over 3, but 119 over the 9 there. And then you've got Sarong, who's, got the 114 average for the season, 116 over 3 and 112 over 9 over the 5. So both been absolutely flying. And Fremantle, though it's probably a very balanced draw for them. It's I wouldn't say it's super easy, but at the same time, for a team that could still be in contention, they have some very winnable games. So the Tigers and the Giants, the first 2 up, and then the Bombers at home. So as much as the Bombers obviously a very improved team this year, they definitely can give points up in that midfield. So that's 3 games that you'll be backing in either a Brayshaw or Sarong to do well. The Blues at home in a few weeks, maybe they would have turned around by then, but they're absolute rubble. Swans, you'd hope they improve, but again, that by then they may be out of contention. So there's a potential that they could have younger kids in there. And during the Supercoach finals, they have West Coast and Hawthorn. So it doesn't probably get any easier than that. So again, it could be either Brayshaw, it could be Sarong. One of them are going to go off the charts. I think we've always said about Brayshaw being a little bit more of that flat track bully. He has scored very well the last couple of weeks against both Melbourne and Geelong. So I would naturally probably would have been leaning towards Sarong, and it was somebody that I definitely had in my side when the Supercoach first opened this week. However, just the rumours about his sort of niggling injury, I think it's that ankle injury, been doing some light training away from the group, and we have seen his score, just go down a little bit over the last few weeks. Not saying that he's not a great pick at all, because he has obviously been flying this season. But then you can see sort of Brayshaw, who gets his points from multiple avenues, not just getting positions, but also as a big tackler. 3 of the last 4 games, outside that Swans game of 88, 149, 134, 127. That's huge. And we know how well he loves playing at Optus. So, I'll back him in. I don't think the projected score of maybe 145 against the Tigers might not come this week, but he has done a number in Richmond before. So, he's definitely got opponents where he has gone huge in the past. So, I think well done to those people. And there was a big spike there, about 5% who jumped on after the Hawthorn game for the 149. But yeah, 14% owned overall at the moment, and is definitely a high trade-in target this week for a lot of people. But in particular, we always talk about the top 1%. So if we go through the top 1% trade-ins for this week, and Brayshaw is actually number 3. And number 1 is naturally Lachie Neale, 31% of trades there, of people there, 594 have traded him in. And, he's already so highly owned as it is. But yeah, Brayshaw, another 13% have currently jumped on at the moment. So yeah, he's definitely a worthwhile target. And the other thing with him versus Sarong, it's that 40k that could make a real difference to my side going forward. And this is where sort of the planning comes in. So third trade originally was going to be Will Day out into Jake Lloyd. And naturally, because Lloyd's obviously been scoring very well, looks like a top 6 defender, just back in that sort of seagulling back pocket role, where Will Day's obviously been struggling. However, closer inspection of that Hawthorn draw, the Hawks do have some very friendly games coming up, and that's why I'm now leaning towards actually keeping Day, because his break-even's only 100 this week, very manageable. As much as he's been struggling to score anywhere near that, his actual AFL fantasy scores have been way over that. It's just his Supercoach scores. But yeah, after this Brisbane game, the Suns, who are an improving team, but the Blues, GWS, North Melbourne, Richmond, St Kilda, that's a fairly outside of playing West Coast in that run, that's probably as easy as a draw that you can get for a 6-week period. So I'd back Will Day. He had the 139 earlier this year against North. So against some of those weaker oppositions, he's still a young body playing midfield. The week off now, refreshes, goes into that period. So I could definitely see him going on a run of about 100, which is not going to be too far off what Jake Lloyd's going to score anyway. So Lloyd, he's going to stay in my side. Now it's just about then, do I want to do the third trade? And this is where the sort of debate's coming. At the moment, I could very easily keep Chincotta, and I'm considering that. The other one I'm considering is putting Chincotta up to Ben Keays. Now, there's a lot of risk involved with Ben Keays, but he does have the break-even of 7. They've got to play West Coast twice, the Crows, so that's naturally a very friendly draw. And his last 2 weeks, he's been back in that midfield role. I think it's 94% CBAs last week. Now, they have indicated he won't be getting that much going forward, but he will still be a very big part of that midfield group for the Crows. So definitely some food for thought there for me. So I'm not totally sold on this yet, because for me, I know I want to get Stewart in next week, and that's Weddle to Stewart. So if I do Chincotta, for example, to Keys, that's actually going to leave me a little bit short, and I'm going to have to make 2 trades to do this. And this is where I was sort of talking to the group today, going, okay, what do I want to do long-term for my team? So one thought is, if it is Chincotta to Keys this week, then it would be 2 trades, which will leave me down to 6 trades to go. Who's the ones on the firing line next week? So it'd be Weddle, Stewart, and then it'd have to probably be only like a Roberts, for example, because there's no one really else for me to trade out. So I'd have to probably go Roberts down to the Geelong boy, or Marich, who's making his debut this week for West Coast, is 102k, which would give me the cash to get Stewart in, but that would obviously leave me 1 trade short. Then it would be about trying to get Briggs to Darcy Cameron, which would get me a D6. Darcy Cameron can also cover my ruck line, and then Ben Keays gets moved into the midfield, and he eventually, when Humphrey gets upgraded, becomes an M9 situation. So that's all well and good, which would have me covered. I'd have to cover the rucks, cover the midfield, cover the forward line with a Keys sitting there, and there's definitely potential Keys at that price could go on a nice little run. So that is something to think about. However, that trade to do Roberts sort of down just to get that cash, or whoever it is, to make that enough cash to get Stewart in, that's going to leave me short. There's potential I could, if there's no injuries by round 18, could have 1 trade left, but could have Will Day and Keys sitting there in my midfield at M9 N10 with the ability that they could cover all lines in case I get a 1 or a 2 week injury. So something that I've obviously had in the past. It works really well because people do struggle then to cover the 1 week injuries, and then you can have a keys or a day there at that value price who can bob up the score anywhere between 80 and 110 on any given week. The flip side to that, I was debating about maybe Jake Lloyd coming in instead of Brayshaw. And I think Lloyd's definitely got the ability to go 100 to 105. As I said, it's not going to be that much more than Day, but it was just the question of how much could Lloyd get towards Brayshaw. And as much as I like that because it gave me the extra 60k, which would not only make sure Weddle gets the Stewart next week, but would give me the cash to go Darcy Cameron to, Briggs straight up to Darcy Cameron. So even if it's this situation at the moment, say the 364, if I didn't get keys, Weddle easy to Stewart next week, gives me that extra defender. And if I actually put my team with all the premiums in, so let's get Sicily back on field and Sinclair there. Just on you come. So this is where I was kind of looking with Lloyd. So Sicily, Dacos, Dawson, Sinclair, Weddle becomes Stewart next week, and then there was the potential with Sinclair with Lloyd sitting there, and then Day would be in that midfield. The forward line looks fine then because we'll take off Roberts, Taranto, Dunkley, Goulden, Rosie, and Canelio, and then Darcy Cameron comes in here. Out goes Briggs. So English and Marshall. If we get an injury there, it's all right because Darcy Cameron comes there. If I had say Ben Keys would come in the forward line, so that covers that. So there was some thoughts around that, and that's also with keeping Will Day and having Lloyd instead of Brayshaw. My team would have been Bont, Merritt, Laird, Neale, Green, Wines, with Day and Keys sitting there, but with the ability with Bailey Humphrey to get into the 450s soon. I could either side swap him for maybe an LD Euro Mills after the buys, or maybe by the last round of the buys, or say an Eddie Ford goes down, and then Bailey Humphrey could go up to nearly anybody in the 600s, maybe even potentially slightly more, and depending if Clary drops price or what Sarong's price is there, could definitely look at getting them, and then I would have Keys and it would be Keys and Day as my M8, M9, and then if I did get a 1 week injury, it naturally wouldn't affect me too much because Keys can very easily come on here, and as I said, having Darcy Cameron, if it was English misses the week, Darcy Cameron comes into the rucks. Keys then goes in the forward lines. If Sicily gets a 1 week suspension or something like that, Will Day goes back into the back line, and then Keys just comes onto the field. So I like that sort of flexibility, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about the potential of bringing in Keys. The 364 at the moment, that does make it easy because it's Weddle into Stewart, and that's going to cost roughly, we think Weddle should get up to 340 next week, so 250 of that. So that'll leave me with 110k. Briggs should get within about 40 to 50k of Darcy Cameron, so that would leave me with 70k. So my back line would be pretty well full, but it'd still have Will Day there. My forward line would be full, but I'd still be having that extra spot, and I'd have 70k to be trying to use Humphrey to get up. The only issue there is I've then lost the opportunity to get in Keys, who at his price at 369, I might not able to pick up another player that cheap. There's potential if Mills comes back, he could get close to 400, so that might be one, but then obviously Mills doesn't have the forward loophole flexibility, so that is the one positive of Ben Keys. And as we said, 102, 106 last week. We know what he's averaged the last few years. Like, he was flying last year. He was averaging 107 until those last 3 weeks, when then they moved him permanent forward, and that brought his average down to 99. And then even the year before, he was a mainstay up in that midfield with 103 average. So this is a guy who can average 100, has the draw to do it, and it's somebody I'm definitely seriously considering chin cotter to Keys and rolling the dice there. Now, the risk there is, what if he goes forward and it doesn't work out? So I'm waiting for teams to be named before I go on that. I want to see where they've named Ben Keys and if there's any potential ins or outs there for Adelaide. Now, that can change as the last sort of 10, 12 weeks of the season. However, if they continue to back him in, and it looks like there's no massive change this week. Against West Coast, I don't think anything will change against them. I think Keys would then go very well if he was named in the midfield. So at least we should get through the bye period. And then if we have to reset on that idea, but by then Ben Keys, for me, is just becoming a bench loophole option anyway. And this is what, anybody who's followed me the last couple of years, it's probably the reason why I rank pretty well, because I've always got that bench loophole. There's nothing worse than trying to cover 1 week injuries. Having a bench loophole is better than having an extra couple of trades up your sleeve, because you're trading somebody one in, one out, and then the next week you get an injury. It hurts you more. So that's why I try to set up my team for this situation, and that's why I'm trying to now keep Will Day so him and Keys can long term become good bench options for me. So that's my team. Johnson will have the emergency on because I can loop him with Humphrey. If Johnson doesn't score well, Wardlaw stays on side. If he does, obviously Humphrey will go there. Forward line, unfortunately, I've got no ability to loophole. Marshall will be on field as much as Briggsy's flying. It's unfortunately can't play all 3 rucks. And then the back line is pretty as is, so we'll see if Chesser gets named. But if Chincotta goes out of my team and Keys comes in, then Ford has the ability to be loopholed. Actually, he probably doesn't, because they're playing, I think, GWS at the same time. So I don't think I would potentially maybe look at loopholing somebody on here just in case. But usually I don't bother with the premiums and that. But because I've got the flexibility of Madden, maybe I will do that. So nonetheless, there'll be 22 players on field. It's still best 18. So I'm pretty happy with how things sit. And as I said, vice captain, it will be the where is he? Lachie Neale. Now the captain just comes down. Now there's a few options tonight that I know people are looking at. Your Steels, Sinclair's, Marshall. They're all solid options. I kind of lean towards Sinclair as the best on that. I think Hickey can be quite a good defensive ruckman. So I'd probably, if you have to have one tonight, now you should have a Geelong or a Gold Coast player in there, so it shouldn't be urgent tonight. So definitely, I don't like the Dogs as much against Port Adelaide. I think that's going to be a cracking game, but I don't sort of trust those players for that match. What I do like is Brayshaw versus Richmond and Merritt versus Carlton. And then you've got the Crows boys, naturally, Dawson and Laird. The problem with that, a Neale or Jimby could go to one of them, and then you're trying to roll the dice which one goes well, which one doesn't, and we've already seen that this season. I think it's Neale, and then with Brayshaw playing later in that evening, that's an easy one. So I think that's your best options. I've got no problem if people don't have Neale going Dunkley. I think that's a pretty good option as well. So one of those Brisbane players is going to go off the charts this week. It's just a question of which one. And if you've got Sarong, as I said, I just worry a little bit about that potential injury. So just consider that as a potential option. But outside of that, that's how we are looking for this round. Hope everybody has enjoyed that. Continue to send in your questions and we'll try to answer them before lockout. Remember, it's 7:10 tonight. And then Friday, we've got the normal start time, 7:50. So you make sure your St Kilda and Sydney players are all locked in. Watch it when you're reverse trading, as everybody saw there. When I reverse trade, all my Saints players went on the bench. There'd be nothing worse. And we see it every week that you make a reverse trade and you forget to put the emergency on one of your players, and it just can ruin your weekend or ruin your Supercoach season. So definitely that's just my little warning there for everyone. Double check that you've got no Saints or Sydney players sitting there on the bench. Outside of that, we will talk soon. Bye.